Okay, a very good morning to you and thank you so much for keeping it NBS Television. It's a Friday, and when it comes to a Friday, of course, I'm super excited about having engagements with journalists and their perspective, making sense of the stories that have made headlines. I think this week entirely has been a Uganda Law Society week. We can literally dedicate this entire month until the end to the Uganda Law Society, because very soon they will be electing their next president. 3 candidates in the queue: Isaac Atkunda, Isaac Semakade, and of course Kenneth Chipalu. Who of them will be taking the day? One says back on track, they're shaking the tables as much as possible. The others are calling for calm. And the Uganda Law Society members will definitely be able to determine and decide who they think will best represent their interest, and that will be coming through. But many of you have asked, why should we pay attention to the Uganda Law Society elections? And that is going to be our conversation. How important is such a body when we're talking about rule of law, when we're talking about democracy, when we're talking about civility in the country? That is the reason this conversation is coming on board. But also, as of yesterday, of course, news had it, and it is so true that the electoral reforms, should we say much awaited electoral reforms, have been tabled before cabinet. Won't we be told it's too late, or we don't have enough time to discuss and then be able to put in place all these electoral reforms? Well, we don't know, but at least the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs thinks that everyone should be able to vote electronically. Electronic voting should be compulsory. That means the diaspora will as well be encompassed in the voting process. That and much more has made headlines for us this week, and we want to pay attention to it. Allow me introduce to you my panel right this morning on the Media Roundtable. On my immediate right is Dr. Gerald Walulia, who is not only a senior journalist, but now moved on to the fact of that he has to train more and more journalists to get into this space. A lecturer at Makerere University. A very good morning to you, Dr. Gerald.
Good morning, Mildred, and thanks for inviting me.
A pleasure having you right here. Joseph Sabiti, in a sabbatical when it comes to active journalism, but like I say, once one, always one, but currently in the office of the Speaker of Parliament. A very good morning to you, Joseph.
Good morning. For a second, I thought I was going for a lecture this morning. I first saw
Dr. Gerald Walulia, then Council
Dr. Kakaire. But it's a pleasure to share a platform.
Oh, these have actually both been our lecturers,
yes,
myself and Joseph.
Council Gawaya, always a pleasure.
Oh, so you thought you were going for a lecture?
I don't know whether he's more lethal with the pen or with the mouth, but always a pleasure.
Or both. Or both of them. And of course, Council Suleiman Kakaire has been out of active journalism for a bit, but he is a journalist. Once one, always one, and also now in the the other side of training more and more journalists to come into the space. And like Joseph said, yes, he's been my lecturer, and Dr. Gerald has also been our lecturer. I don't know if we do the very best of what they expect of us, but anyway, we are on air. We'll discuss those things when we get off air. But Council Suleiman, it's a pleasure having you, and good morning. Say hello to our viewers. Yeah. It's been a while since you last appeared.
It's been a while. My count is 2 years. I haven't been here for 2 years. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here, but the way you've introduced me, you make us look old.
You're not old, but please take your pips.
Okay, these guys have been my colleagues since the WBS days, and now at NBS we have been here. I'm always a journalist.
Sure.
Yeah, even if I take on more hats, I always speak as a journalist. The public interest anchorage that journalism practice shaped me into continues to live with me.
That's very true. Yeah. Like the Nigerians say, once a thief, always one. So once a journalist, always one. Council Gawaya Tegule, a veteran today is a hat that will fit you very well. Whether it makes you feel old, that is up to you. But also a media trainer and an advocate of the High Court. A very good morning to you, Council Gawaya. Until he opens his mouth or until he gets his pen to write. But anyway, it's a pleasure having you gentlemen, and I can't wait to have this conversation. Of course, let's start off with the most burning topic of whether you're going on social media or any other kind of conversation. It's the Uganda Law Society elections. 3 candidates up to replace Bernard Oundo, who is the current president of the Uganda Law Society. That is Isaac Atkunda, Isaac Semakade, and Kenneth Chipalo. Who is most fit? The lawyers will be able to decide that when the elections come to pass. But why pay attention to the Uganda Law Society would be a very big question, and the kind of changes that are expected or required in the Law Society. I want to start with you, Councillor Sulaiman, because even before you joined that particular space, Uganda Law Society had always been, and would we call it a group, an organization or a section that actually shouldn't be left out of the conversation, especially when we're talking about rule of law, democracy, and all that. Here we are again, but this time it seems to be more heated. There seems to be more interest, and I'm asking myself, why is it more? Is it because of the nature of candidates who are joining? We're used to the calm, you know, the lawyers, and this time we're having rattling. We are shaking the tables with expensive drinks. Why do you think there is a lot of attention this time? Because I know that you're feeling the same way.
Yeah, thank you for campaigning for one of the candidates, because the agenda of one of the candidates at least has been taken, it has taken lead in the conversation. But why should the public mind about Uganda Law Society? This is something which is basically drawn from what is Uganda Law Society and its mandate. As an organization which brings together legal practitioners, if you look at the legal framework that that mothered or fathered it, the 1956 Act, and you look at Section 3, one of the things Uganda Law Society is supposed to do is to support and guide the public on matters of law. So whoever leads the society is someone who the public must be interested in and must be they should pay attentive. They should pay attention to who becomes the lead of Uganda Law Society. Because if Uganda Law Society as a body of practitioners is to live up to the expectation of helping the public, supporting the public on matters of law, you will obviously you have to have a leader. You must have a leader who must guide it towards that direction. Now, in many years, I think the most vibrant the Uganda Law Society guidance, I think it was the time of Adrico's time, when the Black Mambas invaded court. Around 2006, 2007, that's when Uganda Law Society came out of the enclave and said, no, we must provide guidance to the public. And indeed, they did something instrumental leading up to a Supreme Court judgment. In the recent years, that has not been happening. And I'm sorry to some of the previous leaders who have led it. It's not that they didn't do anything, but in respect of that particular one, it was. Now, when you see the candidates, one of the candidates, and obviously I have to mention it, my candidate, Isaac Semakade, has brought back that conversation on table. And he's saying that, no. We lost track. We've since lost track. Let's get back on track. That is one of the reasons why the public has been so much interested in the conversation. And the second is even the nature of the candidature of Isaac. Isaac, what he's standing to bring, what he seeks to bring back the life of Uganda Law Society is what he has been doing. He has been representing members of the public, Muslims, Christians. I'm talking about clerics and leaders. You remember when there was an invasion of the sheikhs at Nakaseo Mosque. He represented them, leading to a judgment. You saw he has represented journalists. Joseph, you remember when we had battles with Parliament? I remember coordinating that, and even that's the time I even started working with Isaac as a colleague in the struggle of trying to open a conversation around open parliament, freedom of speech, and other things. Isaac represented journalists, Uganda Journalists Association, Uganda Court Reporters Association, and the jurisprudence is out there. He has represented teachers, he has represented medical doctors, all people. Now, when now he seeks to become a leader of Uganda Law Society, obviously members of the public know the person they are talking about. That is one of the other reasons why Isaac's candidature and even this race has become something to talk about. The last reason, which is very, very fundamental, the way he has framed his candidature, it is a critique to the establishment. He's
critiquing the Uganda Law Society.
He's talked about the head of the bar is the Attorney General. And he's framed his candidature around how do you critique the head of the bar. The society, ideally, it's not spelled out in the law, but if you look at the legal framework and you internalize it deeply, you realize that the Uganda Law Society is supposed to offer the check and balance to government on matters of law. And if you're checking government, obviously we're talking about the legal advisor of government, who is the Attorney General, under Article 119. So, if you're seeking to become a president Uganda Law Society, you must ideally come from that perspective. Obviously, there are those who have talked about stakeholder engagement. If you're president Uganda Law Society, you are going to work with, on most of the bodies, you're going to sit with the Attorney General, you must be colleagues. But I mean, the interests you represent, it should not be skewed in the stakeholderism engagement. It's something you're going to represent particular interests of the public. Now, Isaac has framed his candidature as a critique to the establishment. And that is something very important. In a sense, whereas he has not said, I am a candidate of the political opposition, you realize that most members of the political opposition, especially within the society and outside the Uganda Law Society, have ended up falling for Isaac. Or naturally. And this election of 28th...
It's a journey. And we're not bothered saying that Isaac Semakade is the Messiah. We're saying that little by little.
Let's start somewhere.
Little by little, step by step, slowly by slowly, punde si punde. We want to build
a culture.
Yes, a culture of restoring what has gone wrong. Now, this is part, he's a building block. We're not saying he's answer to everything. But it would be a bad start for us as a country if we are trying, it's like you're trying to move 2 steps forward, then you move 4 steps behind. That is what we're trying to avoid.
Joseph, you will conclude. We take a very short break, and then I'll have Dr. Gerald and Councillor Suleiman wanted to rebut a bit.
Yeah, so here is what I'm saying, that we need to start having conversation about country and the processes, the building blocks, how we are going to make sure that our country goes where it goes. Councillor Gawaya here has not been quiet. Where things have happened and he has not agreed with them, he has been loud. Suleiman has been very loud. David Mpanga has been there. Arias Lukwago has built his entire politics as a rule of law general. The Medad Segonas have been here. Maybe what Councillor Gawaya is saying, that there's need to build a more, a bigger group of people who put country first other than... But also, if you went to any newsroom and asked for their opinion of lawyers, Mildred, those are the guys who are quick at making deals, with all due respect. You throw money on the table and
things done.
And it becomes very difficult to trust the lawyer. I know friends who went to court because their NSSF had not been paid. And they were being represented by a brother of one of these guys, these journalists, and the brother abandoned them in court because the people they had taken to court had spoken the language of the nation, the language of money. So maybe this is feedback for you lawyers, that for us on this side of the world, we hardly trust it. But I think that the most important thing that Isaac Semakade has done is to challenge what over the years has been sort of supreme power, the power of the courts of judicature. it was a taboo to even attempt to start to think of discussing a judge. Even a magistrate. Lawyers don't want to have that conversation. There are judicial officers in this town, by the way, who move with the branding that this one is the high priest of corruption in the courts. You'll find lawyers in their bars whispering. Nobody will say. But I think that Isaac challenges that.
Okay.
The untouchability of the courts. But what is important in all this is that as we challenge, as we bang the tables, as we do whatever we have to do, I think that all our actions should be aimed at building functional institutions for the betterment of the country.
That's very true. We need to take, Council, let's take a very
30
short
seconds,
break.
30 seconds.
Yeah,
Yesterday
sure.
we had a bar bench forum where the judges and the lawyers sit down together to discuss, basically to harmonize positions on this and that. And what came through, the principal judge was there, the chief registrar was there, and many senior judges, and of course many lawyers as well, and then others were online. Now, the truth is, the judiciary is scared. And they were saying themselves, saying, no, I think they are worried that if Semakade becomes ULS president, then the judiciary is done for. And that's why they're calling him, like you said, disruptive. But let me tell you, the status quo at this time does not need compliance. It needs disruption so that we can put the country right, and that is where we need Semakade.
All right. We will continue with this conversation. What are the odds for and against each of the candidates? But at the end of the day, it's not just about the names. It's about the sanctity of the Uganda Law Society as an institution, as a body of professionals. Let's get back to that conversation after this break. You are still watching The Morning Breeze, and this is the Media Roundtable as we continue to look at what's happening in and around the country, the stories that have made headlines and still making headlines, and particularly as we took a break, we were still talking about the Uganda Law Society polls that are coming up in not too long from now. I still do have Council Gawaya Tegule, I have Council Sulaiman Kakaire, Joseph Sabiti, and Dr. Gerald Waluya with me here. Dr. Gerald, I'd like you to weigh in on this conversation of lawyers, because at least for the Law Society, apart from a few instances where we've seen the Law Society embedded in some cases or coming through, most of the time it's always a press conference kind of conversation. The Law Society is releasing a statement on this, and then there is coverage. There's not been very much interaction beyond that. Why should we then pay attention to the election?
I think I agree with what Council Gawaya had suggested, that we should have started with the lay people so that we get the expert opinion later. But I think I also agree with what he said, that although Semakade might not be the Messiah, he might be the first right step that they can use to build the society to become strong again. I remember, I think in the 90s, there is a column that Charles Onyango wrote and said, if you are not happy about anything in government, at least do something, whether it's writing a letter to the editor. So I think these small incremental practices eventually build up to something. I think over the years, President Museveni has succeeded in infusing his leadership or his influence within most of the organized groups, be it journalists. I think to be a president of WUJA, you have to have some form of affiliation with government now. He has done it even with the medical association, and he has also been successful in the Uganda Law Society. In most countries, most of these kind of labor unions, that's where political organizations are born. And he, aware of this, he has been very proactive in trying to diffuse any form of opposition within these organizations. So coming into this election, he knew that everything is covered. But now we have a candidate who is exhibiting unusual traits. And I think the whole noise about this election is about the vibe that Semakade has brought. Even if he didn't say anything, if they show you his picture and they tell you he's representing lawyers, or he's a lawyer, I think you would start to have a conversation. Recently, we had a conference at Makerere University, and our keynote speaker is a Zimbabwean who works in Netherlands. He's a professor in Netherlands, but he has this long hair. And when we posted his picture, some people started saying, "I already like him. I already want to attend." So I think Semakade comes up as this kind of person who doesn't follow the tradition of the profession,
expectations,
and who is not afraid to annoy some people. You see, over the years, most of the people who used to stand up for others have retreated in the interest of protecting their own interests. But I think over the years, Semakade and a few of his other colleagues, I remember this other younger lawyer, Kalamaji, who grabbed the speech of the Attorney General. I think Semakade is in this caliber of lawyers who are not afraid to annoy authorities. So I think people who have been used to the status quo must be worried about this nature of candidate. And we don't only see this in Uganda Law Society. It is also evident in our elections that now the calm, gentle politicians don't have a position in our current politics. You must exhibit a certain kind of aggressive character or unusual behavior, because over the years people have now noted that the old type of people cannot bring out the changes that they probably desire. So as a country and as citizens, we are interested in seeing how lawyers can pull this off, because in any society, lawyers can be a good example of how a country is led. And I am certain that when the judiciary is not functioning well, it's not only ordinary people who take cases to court who are affected. Merit lawyers also cannot practice, because to get a case through, you probably have to get some people paid. So that's why lawyers must be interested in this election to see that they can come back on the course and try to do things the way they are supposed to be done. You never know, through this election, something new might be born. So I think we need to encourage this practice and see where it ends.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Suleiman, you actually had something to say, especially after Joseph had spoken.
Yeah, actually the point I wanted to talk about is the adjusted too, but there is something that Dr. Wali has introduced, which I feel like we need to give it more context. Why did Semakade take on this kind of public projection? Semakade, actually, if I may say, is an intellectual. My first time we interacted, more than 10 years ago, we talked a lot of stuff. We discussed politics, football. He came over at the Observer. By that time, I was still at the Observer. And we walked to his office. We came back. We spent almost 8 hours debating with Isaac. And what draws me to Isaac, to have been colleagues for over 10 years, is his intellectualism. Because me, that's my hobby. I just love that. So Isaac, for a long time, he was this kind of intellectual, but he was speaking from the grave. The Ugandan public was not interested in listening to what he's saying. One of the best negotiators you can find. One of the most, at times when people say, this guy can't engage stakeholders, I mean, Isaac one of the best negotiators. But let's ask ourselves as a country, what led him to where he is now, to say, I take a radical stance, I go extra. He represented Karamagi in that case, because I remember even me personally appearing 2 times to represent Karamagi in that very matter of grabbing the speech. Later, the case dragged on. Isaac represented him. And the space which shaped Karamagi is the same space that has been shaping Isaac. Why does Isaac take on this kind of characterization he is? It's the Ugandan public. Yeah, when they stopped listening. I remember the first time he kept the dreads when lockdown, we were walking along Buganda Road and said, Kaka, do you think this will work? I remember telling him, it's going to be a cultural revolution. That's the statement I remember saying. And I mean, he kept his hair, it's COVID, saloons are not open, but then all of a sudden, it became a culture. Because that is the trivia that defines Uganda society, not Uganda law society only. But it's the Uganda society.
Law society is part of the
this pretense of intellectualism, when you start, you see some of us, when we start to be intellectuals, they say, Kakaile, you are too academic. And I mean, this is hypocrisy. When you say, okay, let's say, okay, we've elevated the debate to intellectualism, and we start to go there, they say you are academic. Now, when Isaac starts to bring it to their averageness, they say, oh, that is low. I mean, that is all hypocrisy.
I think
it is hypocrisy.
In academia, we would say he has decolonized the
and the point, it's the point I wanted to talk about when you said tradition doesn't live. I mean, Isaac doesn't live with this tradition because that tradition it's burdened with many things that are to do with control and subdue. You look, law as a form of training. The way legal education is instructed and nurtures a lawyer into what they become, it's ideally meant to perfect you in a form of coloniality. And that's why Isaac makes it agenda number 1. How do we decolonize this coloniality? You are trying to provide access to justice by telling you wear a suit, put on white shirt with a tie, automatically the poor will distance themselves from you.
Okay.
They live a flashy life. They define you that you're not one of them. And the more you push yourself to them, it's like it's a denial. And Isaac is saying that no, actually we should stop the conversation. Let me tell you, Article 126 talks about law shall be exercised in the name of the people and in conformity with the law, values, aspirations, and norms. But what is trained at law school is just one component. It's trained in law. And yet we are the officers of court who are supposed to engineer the process of justice. But we are not trained in values, norms, and aspirations. You have to go into a relearning session to understand. And Isaac, when he's talking about decolonization, it's
in that context.
It's anchored in a particular discourse of the critical legal tradition, which is a legal movement which starts in 1970s, late 1970s. Right. It's not like Isaac is just picking things off the sky and putting them on table. I mean, Isaac is so much anchored in a debate which is like 1,000 years from now.
All right, thank you very much. Joseph, and as you come through and then Councillor Gawaya comes in, anything election connotes to, an election that is contested in whichever way brings in the notions of how free and fair It will be. And I want to definitely introduce that conversation, because talk about any other bodies. You want to talk about Uganda Journalists Association? It's been definitely the kind of conversation that has been drawn in as well. How different will this election be to bring in the free and fairness that the rightful candidate will actually get to the seat they belong to?
My brother Suleiman has introduced us into the conversation that I think we should have had a long time ago. Any attempt in history, probably in the future, that attempts to disorganize the status quo attracts an equal or twice the force of resistance. And that, the way the Isaac Semakade campaign has framed their campaign message is going to attract exactly that. And that might be advantageous or disadvantageous to his campaign. Once you frame him as the guy against the rest will unite against you. And the likely consequence is that they will swallow you. So probably your campaign messaging needs a bit of moderation. Then you can bang the table once you get there. My 2 cents.
But it is the extreme which is earning him the popularity.
It's a debate of chicken and an egg.
Which came first? It's just a few
there are
more
two
days
things.
to go.
There are two things. The popularity is in the public.
Not the voters.
We are not going to vote.
Yeah, we're not voting.
We already have 2
Yeah,
voters.
but these are two. The legal tradition is caught up in
legal formalism.
In legal formalism and pretense. The grandstanding, you're supposed to act in a particular way, you dress in certain colors. Today you go for the Benedicto Memorial Lecture, you will see the grandstanding of the legal profession. It is about dressing good, dress in a way that me and Dr. Waluya can't
It's a form of coloniality.
It's some sort of colonial mentality that has been glorified to mean being good, being
wise.
Yes. No, like you are the one. Once you have perfected that colonial art and you can caricature it so well, then you're the one. So let's just look at clear examples. There's a lawyer in Kenya called Abdul Nasir. They call him the Grand Mullah. You must know the Grand Mullah. He was, I don't know whether he's still a member of the Judicial Service Commission, by the way. And Abdul Nasir just woke up one day and said the entire Supreme Court of Kenya is corrupt, and corrupt to the core, and has no capacity, no mandate to deliver justice. Every morning he would wake up and write, Chief Justice Martha Koome and your team, you're unredeemably corrupt. He went on media and said, you guys are corrupt. Do you know the result? Neither him nor his law firm can be heard in the Supreme Court of Kenya. That is how much the system responds, Councillor Gawaya. I admire your passion for your country. I admire your passion for your candidate. But what you're going against has capacity to reorganize and swallow you. That's point number 1. Point number 2, Mildred.
Let me just point out
talking about realities. Council, you will have time to rebut. No, you're going to have time to rebut.
2 seconds.
Yes.
On that one, let me tell you, Sabiti. Personally, I don't care anymore. At this stage, this country needs people with a conscience to do what is right, and history
at whatever cost
will judge us correctly.
Okay.
We don't really care about the consequences.
I'm speaking from a communications perspective, that what is more important, saying these things now and getting Isaac hit, or getting Isaac there to allow him to do the things you want him to do.
No, let people know what they're getting into. That if Isaac
let
comes
them
on
know
board,
what he stands
we
for.
don't pretend to. This is transparency. Yes.
I'm just teasing.
Like Suleiman said, chicken and egg. Which one will come first?
No, for me,
Joseph, you're protected.
For me, it's important to tease these issues and see. And you see the same way you're reacting, I'm sure the membership of the Law Society is reacting. These are just my teasing questions. You probably don't need to respond to them. Mildred, I just wanted you to put our journalism, disorganized fraternity aside. and let's deal with our mess.
I was just giving an example when it comes to elections.
That's like the most wrong example to give about elections.
Okay.
People who gather, people who can't organize an election with a non-register of about 500 people. You go somewhere and then people go and carry cooks, cleaners, give them IDs and no. Let's stop. But
who does that?
Uganda Journalists Association.
You're kidding me.
Where have you been?
And you have been part of that. You have been part of the journalists in Uganda.
By the way.
Okay. No, let's get back to lawyers. Let's go back to Lawyers Society. Yeah, sure.
For me, I'm saying the quality of our elections, the integrity of elections, they go back to the kind of society that we live in. We have raised devils, evil spirits, grandsons of evil spirits, and then we expect holiness in the arena of elections.
Okay.
That's the facade, that's all pretense. For me, I am saying that, look, I think that the lawyers should remember that they are officers of court. They represent the conscience of a country. They are supposed to be the loud voice when all of us have gone crazy. And one of the things, I don't know if you who is involved in the Isaac campaign have noticed, that one of the strongest oppositions is going to come from the political opposition. Because Isaac's fame and his acceptance, the popularity in the public, is raising unconsciously an opposition leader.
Oh, yeah.
So expect some, don't think that your colleagues, they call them what? People in the struggle, will all embrace the struggle. They will punch you from within harder than the bad guys in the
because in the political opposition, they are also career seekers.
Yes, you're challenging the status quo. But finally, the last example I wanted to give is, for me, there are two people I have studied closely, and they reflect similarities. One is Yusuf Serunkungu, and the other is Isaac Semakade. Yusuf has retreated to his pen and annoyed every single soul walking in this town who wields any kind of power. What has been the reaction? Makerere University, the stature, the symbol of academic prowess, intellectualism, and discussion, did not take 30 minutes to write a press release disowning their student because he said what they did not like to hear. So for me, and over time, Council, I have evolved into a realist. In my younger years, I spoke from mass.
You are pragmatic.
I spoke from mass. Said this, we demand this. Now I don't demand what I can't get. Until I am able to contribute to build a base.
Maybe you've retreated to self-preservation.
No. You see, there are two things.
Because of the realities of what is happening.
I have since transitioned into a realist. I don't speak from, in my language, they say beating the drum when you're still in the sky. You fell from a mango tree before you land safe. Because you're close, you start beating the drum that now I've landed. So I am a realist, and I'm saying that I believe we can do better as a country. Okay. And I believe there should be steps to that. But also, lastly, to my two brothers, I also learned one thing from James Orengo. He's very senior lawyer in Kenya. And they call him the walking constitution of Kenya. And he said over time he has learned that you don't do politics and public affairs with your heart. You use your head. Because to see a better country, you must stay alive and save yourself from high blood pressure. All
right, thank you very much. I would like to give 60 seconds to Council Gawaya and probably a few to Dr. Gerald before we take a break. We're due for that. And mine was specifically on what Joseph actually talked about, the reality of living to see the dream and that hope come to pass based on the disorganization we get in elections, whether professional bodies or nationally.
I don't even think I understand your question, Mildred.
You can set your own question.
I might set my own question.
How easy is it going to be to get the free and fairness of an election you deserve as Uganda Law Society? Let me make it that easy.
No, to be fair, I think over the years, the election process at Uganda Law Society has been free. It has been fair. At least the actual process, the actual voting itself. Yes, I think it has reflected the feeling or the sentiment of the voters. Maybe you might question the process leading to that, but I think the actual voting usually reflects the sentiment in the voters. So I do not have any particular worry about voting day. I think the issue would be, are we able to marshal our support for Isaac Semakade leading to that? And I think my message to the lawyers of this country is simple. It is, I think, Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the US, many years ago, who said, when tyranny becomes law, then resistance becomes a duty. And the call of Uganda at this time to the lawyers of this nation is that in the face of tyranny, resistance to and disagreement with this tyranny is a duty of all Ugandans, and in this case, a duty of all the lawyers. The Bible tells us, to whom much has been given, much is expected.
Yeah.
Lawyers have been entrusted. God has given you the grace to study law for 5 years, sometimes 7, 10 years. So you know a lot of law. You know what things are supposed to be like. So you have a higher duty than any other Ugandan to say this is the way, like I think it was Isaiah 60, where the Lord says, this is the way, walk in it. Turn not to the left, nor to the right. And for me, that should be the message to the lawyers as we go to vote, as we approach voting day. There's another man called Benjamin Rush many years ago, I think around 1800, more than 200 years ago. He says, resistance to tyranny is obedience to God. When you resist evil, when you push back against tyranny, you are, in other words, obeying the Most High God. And this is what God expects lawyers to do, that in the face of what is happening in this country, the deep state, the corruption, the collapse of rule of law, the collapse of all known order, and where disorganization and chaos has become the order of the day, lawyers have a duty to obey the Lord. What does the Lord expect us to do? The right thing, and vote a person who is going to push back against this, not a conspirator, a co-conspirator against the people of Uganda, not to compromise, and not to be compromised by the money that the state offers, not to collaborate with the oppressors, but to say, no, this is how things stand, and the Lord expects us as lawyers to do what is good, what is right, what is fitting, and we need to vote a candidate who represents righteousness, rule of law, who represents, you can flinch all you want, my dear Mildred, and I'll still tell you, we're talking about righteousness. We're talking about rule of law. We're talking about obedience to God. What does Uganda want? Uganda wants a place where the Constitution is supreme, where rule of law is felt, not where a few people, where a small predatory elite is able to be above the law, operate outside the law, suck all the resources, and then do what they want in the country, irrespective of where we're going. And that, my friends, is where we say Isaac Ssemakadde at this time represents what God expects of every lawyer in this country, to have him at the Law Society, hold government accountable, hold the president of this country, his cabinet, this parliament, and everybody else accountable. Law Society should be the conscience, the spirit of the nation. The guys who say, we are the prophets. As lawyers, we are the high priests of the law. We're the officers of court in the temple of justice. We are the priests who serve in the temple of justice. We're the people who know, who call people for Holy Communion. And we should be the people at the forefront of saying, this is wrong, government, whatever you're doing is wrong. And that is where Isaac Ssemakadde comes in at this particular time.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Gerald, you'll have about a few seconds before we get into a break. Looks like our second topic has already been that up.
The constitutional reforms.
Dr. Gerald, go ahead.
I think everything that was supposed to be said has been said.
Okay.
We are only looking forward to see who eventually is elected. I'll be so excited to see two people who stand on extremes. Chilio Wachiwanuka on one side and Isaac Ssemakadde on the other side. I think now that we no longer have the people who are supposed to check government are no longer active, we are looking to such organizations like Uganda Law Society. I know that they speak a lot of, that government has a lot of impunity, but in most cases when such organizations speak, they are hurt if they are criticized. So we need people who are still able to say something that others are afraid to speak.
Okay. Speak truth to power, for lack of a better word. Thank you so much. We need to take a very short commercial break. And when we do return, we'll be wrapping up our conversation here on NBS Media Roundtable. Let's get back. All right, we need to close this off, and we just have a few minutes to be wrapping up this conversation. One of my panelists said, but we definitely have to to take on this
everybody
conversation.
must be buried.
I forgot we're on air.
Yeah, we're on air, gentlemen. After getting done with the conversation, you're left with 8 days. The election of ULS is 28 this month.
Yes, 28.
28. That's about 8 days to go, and we'll be here to give you the results as they come through. But also, one conversation that has stayed with us for the longest since we came back from the elections was electoral reforms. I think for every year that we're going towards elections, we always have conversations of tabling electoral reforms. And to the cabinet, they're already there. If I could just give you a bit of what the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs is asking for, as well as Ugandans. One of them that stands tall is electronic voting. How important, how different will these electoral reforms, if turned around, will they change the landscape of our elections? I want to start with Council Suleiman, especially given the fact that every time we're talking about electoral reforms, I flash back to the Citizens Compact on Electoral Democracy that happened at a Hotel Africana around 2015, and we thought we had written down, we had elaborated, and by saying we, looking at the voices of Ugandans that came through on what exactly was desired and where we are, that we've continued to have piecemeal electoral reforms. Do you think this will be any game changer ahead of the elections? Because we will always talk about time not being adequate.
You know, thank you, Mildred. At times I'm reluctant to participate in these engagements because I come off as Beno and commonplace kind of talker. But what's Uganda's problem now? Obviously, we need the reforms. But the kind of reforms that people want, unfortunately, they can't be delivered. The last time a conversation happened around fundamental reforms in the Constitution, the military intervened to define the discourse of the course of the conversation. And that's where we are. Because when we go for these reforms, particular things will be said that perhaps the military not get involved. We need maybe this kind of protection, appointment of electoral commission. And we know those things will not be allowed to happen.
Okay.
They will not be allowed to happen. You know, there is some simplicity with which we approach these conversations, forgetting that the kind of government we have, this is how it has lived. But I urge the guys who are, the people who have been running it and who are in charge of it, that, well, if we are scared of its wrath, it has already happened to us. If we've had to bear the brunt of its excesses, I don't know how many wounds we have on our bodies. We've already bore it, and right now what we need is a dialogue around the post-Museveni government. The president, this is something which is not just even about reforms. Whereas the reforms offers an opposition an opportunity to frame a conversation within the public, which perhaps can lead to building a momentum that can push. That is an opportunity for them. But I don't know. I've been in that space. I don't know whether that's what we are ready for, and we can touch on and say as opposition, okay, Honorable Mao tables the reforms in Parliament, then opposition comes up with an alternative. Honorable Mathias Mpuga is coming up with some proposals, and opposition picks on them and say, this is what we want. Let's take the conversation to the public. And you build momentum around that. You push government, and government says, okay, please, you know what, guys? let's have a conversation. Because right now, what this country needs is a conversation.
Yeah.
Two extremes will not get us out of the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need some sobriety. We need some level of maturity. And this is why the Isaka candidature is key. Because people have refused to listen to people who are calm, collected, and they have said, no, 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 no. That is all useless. That is all this. That's why the banging the table is key.
Okay.
Because the president of Uganda Law Society, who is going to say, okay, this is what the Law Society position on this. And as lawyers, we come up with, this is what we are supporting. And the conversation is framed around that. It can cause some level of momentum building to lead us into a national dialogue.
Thank you.
Reforms will not deliver anything apart from having that dialogue, that when the law is eventually even passed, because there is even agreeing to the law, and it's not respected, and there is a history to that.
All right, thank you very much, Suleiman. And I hear you that it's about agreeing both sides and two extremes. Two wrongs do not make a right. So two extremes pulling to different sides cannot come to a harmonious position. Joseph, I think to every election, we will always have a conversation on reforms. Is there any expectation and hope of any change of the political sphere because of these proposed amendments?
The last few days I've thought about, reflected deeply about our country, where it has been, where it is going. And I think that we need to start being honest with ourselves. There's too much grandstanding on both sides of the debate. We are so much driven by what trends and what people want to hear. We are not speaking as nationalists, as patriots. For me, the starting point would be to create an interdenominational point of repentance, national point of repentance, where probably all of us first go and repent our sins to Mother Uganda, and then we start talking real. We have had a government that has clearly demonstrated that they have been here for 40 years and demonstrated that they are going to be here. We have an opposition that has been shouting at this government for the last, I don't know how
40
many,
years.
40 years. They have threatened them, they have promised tsunamis, they have done everything.
And it has not come to
And it has not come to pass. The tsunami, Kotapin, Nyondo, another person says, Robadop style, we are taking
Agenda, Chigwalero.
Chigwalero, Funandaga Muntu, leave the rest to me. Guys, the man is here. The ones shouting against him are here. We have reduced the country to these two blocks. The country is bigger than all of us and bigger than these blocks. The country will be here after these people go. The country is here when they're here. I think I agree with Suleiman that people abused Natif when he talked about the concept of a safe corridor. And Natif is another Semakade. He has slapped. I think during the Parliament exhibition, he's the guy who tortured us the most. But it's amazing. I can pick my phone now and call Natif, and we'll have a conversation. We'll agree that this is about country. It's not personal.
Everyone is making a contribution.
Everyone is making a contribution.
And no one should claim to love it more than another.
This country more than the other. And that the things I am saying are not because I hate you or the person you work for, but because I expect better of my country.
Yeah, for the future.
For the future. Those are people who have my respect. And we can pretend, we can abuse each other, you can call people, talk about the safe corridor compromise, but a legitimate. Isaac also warned us about the other safe corridor, where I go and catch my check, then I come shouting safe corridor. But there are people who are legitimately trying to create a safe corridor for this country. Those are people who have my respect. And this conversation about reforms will depend on how honest we are.
Okay.
The largest preoccupation of the political opposition in the last 4 months, if my journalistic mind is still credible, has not even been on electoral reforms or on President Museveni, has been on how to finish Matthias Mpuga.
But we need reforms, obviously.
No, I'm just saying, the priority of the official opposition has been how to finish Mpuga. That has been their biggest in the boardrooms. If you have your ears there, you can cross-check. That has been the biggest discussion. After how to finish Matthias Mpuga has been how to take on the speaker.
But is Honorable Mpuga the main problem of
That's
the
the
opposition?
point. Is it
not.
the
So
main problem
if
of
someone
It's not about
frames it that
individuals.
way,
if
then
your
we should be asking, Sabit, just a minute, then we should be asking those who are framing it that way, what is their motivation?
those are the messiahs of your country. If you don't agree with them, you've sold out.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So that's how the public discourse has been framed. So I'm saying that in this country, there are still the Dr. Waluyas, the Suleimans, the Council Gawayas. There are people out there. But I think that you're right when you accused me of probably retreating into
The safe zone.
Yeah,
because probably well,
that was off the air.
Because probably we can do better. We can do more for our country. But this country's future is going to be negotiated. You can somersault, you can shout, you can accuse people, abuse and everything. When we are done with all that nonsense, we're going to have to sit as a country. And let me tell you, if we don't do it now, circumstances will force us to do it.
Okay. Change will change you if you don't want to change. Dr. Waluria, weighing in on the issue of reforms, but in a broader perspective, our conversation is mainly about the nature of elections, the delivery that comes of it, and at a later stage, what becomes of the entire political sphere.
I think I agree with Council Gawaya that this is a rabbit that we are discussing.
That's why it came later.
It has been on the table every time there is an election.
But you know, a lion standing at the gate for long doesn't make it a rabbit. It still remains a lion.
Oh, okay.
The Constitution is supreme. The Law Society is a small subset of a country.
Yeah.
So,
in any case, even the election of 28th, it's connected to these coming
conversation
reforms.
of the reform.
the word reform carries a positive connotation. So when someone says, I'm bringing reforms, first of all, you need to ask yourself, reforms, whose reforms, in whose interests are these reforms going to be? Do we expect the government to bring reforms that are going to take away power from them? I think certainly the answer is no. So over the years, there have been proposals for reforms, but most of the times, the kind of proposals that they bring cannot bring meaningful reforms. I agree that probably we need to have some form of negotiation, that the future of the country will be negotiated, but you can't negotiate with a powerful person. As long as someone still feels powerful enough to hold a position or to hold whatever he wants to have, you can't invite him for a negotiation. So we need to create some form of public momentum that can necessitate a negotiation. But at this point, no one is going to invite you for a negotiation because the people who want changes are many, but they seem powerless. So that's where I think things are going to become very difficult. The government is not interested in any meaningful reforms, and whether they say this or the other, whatever they will propose will not be different from what is existing. And I wouldn't want to blame people in the opposition that they are not thinking about reforms. You can bring proposals of 100 pages, but no one is going to adopt them because we know that the processes through which some of these things have to go are filled with people who are not interested in what you are proposing.
Okay, thank you very much, Council. The last leg of the rabbit is to you as we take the very short commercial break. Because like Joseph said, the reality is this is also another huge monster that we've continuously talked about and never really get to deal with it holistically. But it's very, very important for the future, for the now and the future of the country.
Almost 40 years ago, somebody asked a question, what is Africa's problem? When you talk about electoral reforms right now, I'll tell you one thing. Anybody who expects electoral reforms in this country must be very, very naive, because Africa's biggest problem cannot cut the branch on which he is seated.
And your submission is done. Thank you very much, Council Gawaya.
Maybe
we are not going to discern what you've said.
Maybe to add,
yes,
is that in the history of reforms, there's nobody who has done it voluntarily.
Yeah.
You must create the necessary conditions for reforms. And those conditions have not included some of the things we are seeing here.
That's why a national conversation is key.
That is why we must talk as a country.
Because the last time you had a conversation in Parliament, and it was fundamental, the military did what? Intervened. The other time, when you debated the term limits, presidential term limits, in 2003, the decision was made by High Command. The then representative of the military, General Mugisha Muntu, when disagreed with the government, he was dropped as a what?
And that is
we
why
have to be very careful and know where is the center of power. And that gravitas, is it willing to let go? Because we have all the wounds and we are coming. Please, let's have a conversation. Let's move beyond.
At least one thing that is for sure, we will all get away. We will all be away. Whether the current 2 big wigs or 3 or 5 big wigs, one thing for sure that will remain is the country. But what kind of country do we want to create and bequeath to our children and great-grandchildren? That's a conversation that we should all wake up one day and be able to ask. It doesn't matter which side you belong to, opposition, government, whatever, neutral, but the country remains bigger than all of us. Thank you very much, Council Gawaya Tegule. Thank you very much to you, Council Suleiman Kakaire. The realist now, Joseph Saviti, and of course to you, Dr. Gerald Balui, and to you, our viewer, for spending time with us this morning. Let's continue with any other conversation on our socials. I am Mildred Tuhaise. Good morning. God bless you.